All right, y'all, welcome to the show. We got a big one for you today. So I'm going to talk in a minute about this new resolution being brought up in Congress. And the idea of it is to officially declare that anti-Zionism is the same thing as anti-Semitism. So if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semitic. I have a lot to say on that, so buckle up. We're going to get to that in just a minute. We're also going to talk a little bit about Tucker Carlson, who, of course, is... I think he only does his show on Twitter now, right? Isn't that, like, the primary place where his show is? Well, anyway, he's desperately trying to maintain relevance, so he's done a complete and utter 180 on his deeply held beliefs, and I'll expose all that for you. It has to do with Trump. Later on, Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire admit that their entire comedy movie, the whole premise of their comedy movie about transports is completely and utterly bogus. And then we'll also talk about the George Santos movie, which is happening, and a massive, massive crackdown on the LGBTQ community, this time happening in Russia. So we'll talk about all that and much more. By the way, everybody do me a big favor. Please subscribe to the channel. It helps out massively in the algorithm, and it doesn't cost you anything at all. And consider, if you haven't yet, tipping $2 a month, either through Patreon, that link's below as well, or just a super chat on YouTube, because on most of these segments where I talk about Israel, which is the main news story these days, we get demonetized instantly. So any bit helps. And by the way, huge thank you to everybody who does support this show. You guys make it work. Remember, I've never had a conversation with an advertiser. I'm very proud of that fact. I'm one of the only people in this business that can say I've never had a conversation with an advertiser. And you guys have made that possible by helping build it from the ground up. And that goes all the way back to remember the old school days of the Adpocalypse, the original Adpocalypse. You guys help fund this show, and I love you to death for it. I couldn't do it without you. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. So take a look at this, y'all. Ryan Grimm comes out and says the following: a new House resolution, which may be voted on as early as tonight, clearly and firmly states that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. This comes after a previous resolution hinted at that claim, but did not fully state it. So now Congress wants to leave no question. And, this is the text of the bill that they're talking about here. Anti-Zionism is the same thing as anti-Semitism. This, by the way, let's just reflect on the fact that this is what Congress is focused on at the exact same time we have a massive slaughter of innocent Palestinian civilians being waged by the Israeli government. Depending on which numbers you believe, it's up to 21,000 Palestinians have been killed. About 19,000 of the 21,000 are innocent civilians, including over 8,000 children, over 4,000 women. Half of Gaza is totally uninhabitable. People are drinking seawater to survive. The hospital system has completely collapsed. Now they're saying, hey, Palestinians, in order to survive, you need to go to this one area in Gaza, which is a totally desolate, empty desert without any UN tents or facilities to help you in any way, shape, or form. So they were told to move from North Gaza to South Gaza to protect yourself if you're a civilian. Then Israel bombards South Gaza. We're witnessing something the likes of which we've never seen, certainly in my lifetime. It is, if you take the words of top Israeli government officials directly and literally, they are doing an ethnic cleansing. So at the same time that's going on, backed by our money, with our weapons, this is what Congress is focused on. Let's come up with crafty, clever new ways to call people anti-Semitic. If you're anti-Zionist, that is the same thing as anti-Semitism. So let's dive into that claim. So first of all, let's talk about our definitions here. Zionism. If you type into Google Zionism definition, this is what you get. A movement for the reestablishment and the development and protection of a Jewish nation in what is now Israel. Jewish nation. So the gist of it is, Zionism is the belief in an official Jewish state. Now you can view that as an ethno-state, if your definition of Jewish in this context means the ethnicity of Jewish. It could be an ethno-state, or it could be a theocracy in the sense that is based on Judaism, the religion. Or, I think the most straightforward interpretation of it is really both. So a Jewish nation that is both a Jewish ethnic state, but also a Jewish theocracy in the sense that the Jewish religion informs and helps govern the state with the rules and the laws. So that's what Zionism is, an official Jewish state. What's anti-Semitism? Hostility to or prejudice against Jewish people. So anti-Semitism is basically somebody who believes Jews are inferior, in the same way that a racist would say, I think other races are inferior. An anti-Semitic person would say, I think Jews are inferior. Usually they mean like inherently inferior, right? So stop and think about what they're saying here. Congress wants to officially declare, if you're against a Jewish state, a Jewish ethno-state or theocracy, that is the same thing as viewing Jews as inferior and hating Jews. That should be insulting to your intelligence. That's the same thing. The best analogy is this. Saudi Arabia is an Islamic theocracy. There's a lot of official Muslim theocracies around the globe. If you say, I'm against the existence of a Muslim theocracy, an Islamic theocracy, then that means you hate all Muslims? You think Muslims are inferior? You're Islamophobic? Everybody would laugh that claim out of the room. Rightly so. Rightly so. Because you could have no problem with Muslims as people. You could view Muslims as equal and like any other human beings, but also say, hey, by the way, I don't think you should have a religious theocracy that dictates rules that everybody has to live under. Look, I believe in secular democracy. I think that's the best form of government. I don't make special exceptions for Islamic theocracies or Jewish theocracies. Or, if there was an official black nationalist state that was based on race, so an ethno-supremacist, this is only a black state, I'd have a problem with that. If they said, hey, you come here, and if you're not black, we either won't accept you or you'll live under a separate set of rules that we dominate, we'll treat you as less than, I'd say, I'm against that. Well, the same thing applies for a Jewish state. The exact same thing applies. You can't say we're allowed to have an ethno-state or a theocracy, and if you criticize it, you are against all Jews. That's just so incredibly dishonest, man. That's so dishonest. Now, I like this point. I have to bring it up here from Eli Valley. He says, among other things, by codifying ethno-nationalism as the only acceptable expression of Judaism in America, this is the most anti-Semitic resolution to be considered in generations. So in other words, if you're saying the only true Jew is a Zionist, well, that's anti-Semitic. Because you're saying if you don't agree with me, if you're an anti-Zionist Jew, you don't count. We're saying you don't count as a Jew. And that is totally disrespectful to those Jews. Now, by the way, there are so many anti-Zionist Jews. Of course there are. They're leading many of the pro-Palestine protests. If Not Now is the name of one of the groups. Not in My Name is another one of the groups. These are people who are Jewish who say, look, I don't like how the Israeli government is treating Palestinians. I don't like the occupation. I don't like the apartheid system. I don't like the ethnic cleansing we're currently witnessing. I don't like the genocide. I don't like the killing over 90% innocent civilians. I don't like that. I don't like bombing residential buildings, apartments, marketplaces, mosques, hospitals. I don't like that. So I'm going to stand up and fight against it. And these people would say to those Jews, you hate all Jews. You're an anti-Semite. So where's the real anti-Semitism in question here? Where's the real anti-Semitism? It's like saying to Muslims, the only ones of you who count are the Salafi jihadists, the extremist Sunnis. You're the only true Muslims. Well, that's bogus. There's also Shia Muslims. There's also Sufi Muslims. There's a million different kinds of Muslims. There's a whole spectrum of how conservative you are from within the religion. Again, imagine criticizing an Islamic theocracy, saying, I don't think this government should exist. I'm more for secular democracy. And then they tell you, you're Islamophobic. You hate all Muslims. Everybody would say that's ridiculous. But they're trying to codify that for Zionism and Judaism. It's so wild, man. It's so wild, so dishonest, so disingenuous. And this is the moral panic currently ongoing as Palestinians are being slaughtered by the day. The whole conversation is bogus. The whole conversation is nonsense. So anyway, this is what Congress is working on. They're not working on crafting a resolution to stop giving weapons to human rights abusing, war crimes committing regimes. They're not trying to stop giving Israel $38 billion a year, stop giving them weapons. They're not working on doing something at the UN to condemn the massive numbers of civilians who have been killed. They're not doing any of that. Biden's not forcing their hand behind the scenes to get back to the table and negotiate a two-state solution. None of that's going on. This is what they're focused on. And by the way, you know what's going to happen. Anybody who votes against it, immediately in unison, all the others will say, you're an anti-Semite. Immediately in unison. And the media will probably join in. You know, somebody like Ilhan Omar, who's already been accused of anti-Semitism because she said it's all about the Benjamins to the Israel lobby. They pay politicians to get their bidding done in the same way that the Saudi lobby does it. Well, she was called an anti-Semite for pointing out that fact. And now if she votes against this, they're going to say, see, told you she was an anti-Semite. It's all so dishonest. It's all so dishonest, man. Now, look, by the way, at the end of the day, there already is a Jewish state that exists in the same way there are Muslim theocracies that exist. Like, they already exist in the world. Do I want that to be the case? No, I believe in secular democracy. I don't make exceptions for that based on virtue signaling, right? Like, no, that's the way it should be. But there already is a Jewish nation. So will there continue to be a Jewish nation under any sort of negotiated settlement for a Palestinian state or a peaceful resolution? Yes. And I can live with that. But don't lie to me and tell me that if you oppose an official Jewish ethno-state or theocracy, that you hate all Jews. Because that is one quick way to get me to never listen to another goddamn word you have to say because you're a smear merchant liar. But apparently all of Congress are working on being smear merchant liars. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.